So when I made episode 1, that was originally with the idea of only providing the bare essentials of Ghost Frontline 1's story. Obviously, plans have changed. I'm glad so many of you have enjoyed me going into more detailed summaries despite the original intent. Some are even using this series to experience the story instead of playing the game itself. Not gonna lie, that is a little conflicting since I really love Ghost Frontline 1 as a game. But I'm not going to tell you the gameplay is easy to get into. It's definitely a mess. Rambling aside, I feel there's a higher responsibility for me to cover what I skipped in episode 1, something that is actually very critical to understanding the story as a whole, which is Squad 404. Squad 404 is basically a second set of main characters that heavily influenced the first half of the game's story. I'm saying up front it was a major mistake to not talk about them sooner, and this video is aiming to fix that. Consider this an episode 1.5 if you will. But one thing before I get started. Since it's a running joke that I've mispronounced things, let's talk about SF. Not even Ghost Frontline 2 helps in this department because they avoid saying the full name, so we never get an idea of how it's actually said. Well, I finally looked this up. And turns out this is a Latin term, which means blood iron or iron blood for a slightly more liberal translation. Iron meaning fairy and blood meaning sanguis. And in Latin, the V is pronounced like either a U or a W. So in all, it's pronounced sanguis fairy. Now, it's completely possible you can say songvis fairy because that's what the English dub used in the anime. And while this could just be a mistake, and it probably is, it's very possible that this is how the actresses were told to pronounce it. Just want to get that out there. From this point forward, I will be pronouncing it as Sanguis Fairy. Now, on to the summary. The year 2061 was a time when things were simpler. While skirmishes and civil unrest were still present, it was a time of relative peace. Late 2061 marked the beginning of the end to that peace. The one at the center of this was a Sanguis T-Doll named UMP-45, a cyber warfare specialist in a world where cyber electronics were a complete luxury. Without anything to this specialty, she was just an entirely unremarkable and ordinary T-Doll. Her history before this point is entirely unknown, as her makers completely cleaned out her memories with no trace. The person she was before was effectively erased. At this point, she was only given one objective: be an exceptional Griffin T-Doll. That in of itself was hard. Thanks to her specifications as a cyber warfare specialist, she literally was not built for combat. The best she had was a low-grade fire control core, which is needed to immediately be a useful combatant. But since the grade was so low, she could barely be considered decent with her weapon. 45 had a terrible time with her first team in Griffin. Her commander held no respect for her, and deemed her so useless that she would not be allowed to take breaks until she improved her combat capabilities. This led to 45 working tirelessly to prove herself. During this grueling time, she was approached by another doll. Thanks to her being practically fresh, she had no idea they were actually the same model from the same factory. This T-Doll was named UMP-40, and she had gone through the same grueling sessions to improve her own specialties. While 45 was reluctant to open up to her, 40 was the complete opposite. One would even consider she was overbearing, but she was just the cure that 45 needed. 45 had already deemed herself a failure, as she lacked an understanding of why she was so much worse than everyone else. But 40 explained everything to her and provided her training data. Along with that, she claimed 45 as her younger sister and dear friend. 40 not only helped her get to a respectable level of combat, but she had also helped 45 believe there is more to life than just obeying orders. 40 believed a commander should be mindful of a T-Doll's happiness, and those who do not are not worth following. This in particular did not exactly stick to 45, But 40 assured her that T-dolls were given emotions precisely because they're supposed to act like humans. During their time together, 40 has shown her images of places they could go once they proved themselves to Griffin, and she told 45 of her dream to see the ocean, and that dream now includes her little sister at her side. They then made a promise to each other that they will change their fate of being useless T-dolls and get bodies worthy of their strength, and then go see the world together. They would eventually get their chance to prove themselves when Griffin lent several of their T-dolls to the Neo-Soviet Union Bureau of State Security, also known as StateSec. During this time, their commander within StateSec told them to remove all of their logs involving Griffin and to install memory safeguards. There was no reasoning given, but 40 assured 45 that the mission involved must necessitate this to avoid any information being leaked. They were then put on Support Squad 14. Their mission was simple: hack into Sanguis Base 0 and allow their teammates to infiltrate unhindered in order to capture Lycoris, the leader and mastermind behind SF. From here, they got to know Squad 7, led by M16A1. With her was HK416. Despite seemingly being friendly with each other, the two couldn't be any more polar opposites. While M16 was friendly, easygoing, and supportive, 416 was abrasive, arrogant, and extremely critical. Thanks to 416 being a fresh model, she did not have the experience to appreciate camaraderie, or even respecting the chain of command. The combination of all of these led to 416 being nearly insufferable to work with for anyone except M16. And even then, 416 was so repulsed by 40 and 45's terrible combat during training that she assaulted 45 to prove how terrible she was. This led to M16 requesting 416 be transferred back to Griffin on the grounds of her being a danger to the operation, and this was approved. M16 was the one to give her the bad news, and while 416 stated she just wanted to do what she felt was best, M16 responded that they are T-dolls and it was not their place to decide that. 416's anger flared, but M16 smacked the hell out of her and told her plainly that she is not an elite T-doll, and is just pathetic and delusional. This was enough for 416 to be stunned into silence long enough for M16 to leave her be, and afterward she apologized to 40 for having to deal with 416, and to give her regards to 45. Very soon after that, the day of the operation came, and the operation itself went smoothly. Support Squad 14 handled their job without issues. During this time, 40 had asked 45 for total access to her neural cloud, and to let her handle whatever commands come their way. The infiltration force, mixed with T-dolls and humans, secured the factory and captured Lycoris. As Lycoris was being escorted out, 40 and 45 heard a foreign command on a different network, telling them to execute Order 61. 45 did not know what this was, but 40 did. Upon receiving this order, 40 released the parapluie-virus, which caused the SF factory to go haywire. On top of this, the T-dolls quickly became infected and gone berserk. The operation went completely out of control, but 40 had one thing on her mind, which is to get 45 away from combat. 40 and 45 stuck together as they had to kill their own teammates, and eventually they successfully got a moment to themselves. 45 slowly went into despair, not understanding what was going on, but it was at this point 40 confessed that this was all part of the plan. This operation was never meant to be a capture mission. It was always meant to be framed as a massacre, with nothing left behind. During their time together, 40 and 45 connected their neural clouds together in order to silently enjoy each other's company. But 40 had learned of what 45's purpose was from reading her neural cloud. 45 is a carrier of the parapluie virus, and since 40 was the original model, 40 had realized that she was one as well. Whoever made them and gave them this purpose wanted to ensure the plan would go off without a hitch. So instead of relying on just one T-doll, they ensured they had a backup just in case there was a problem. At that point, 40 understood that they would only live long enough for this mission, and afterwards, their neural clouds would be incinerated on the spot, leaving no survivors. Thanks to Stage 6 installing the memory safeguards, she had no way out. But 45 did not need to share the same fate. Thanks to 45's absolute trust in her, she had provided total command authorization to 40 when she provided access to her neural cloud. This allowed 45 to not be triggered by the foreign command, and her virus was never unleashed. But now there is one thing left to do. 40 needed to get 45 out. But thanks to them running into multiple T-dolls, 40 couldn't make it in time before the virus began to overtake her system. So as a final gambit, she had told 45 to kill her. As long as one of them dies, the safeguard would not trigger. 45 desperately hesitated, completely lost in the chaos of the situation. But 40 told her she had to make a choice. They either die together and never change their fates, or she could live for both of them. After desperately trying to find another solution, 45 stated she wanted to live. 40 was glad to hear it, but she then had to test her resolve. She asked 45 again to kill her. She tells her, "This is only the beginning, 45. After this, you will face countless trials, and the right choices are always the ones that hurt you the most. But if you want to live, you have to make them." 45 asked her why it had to be this way, but 40 said they're out of time, and she has to do it now. No longer hesitating, she pulled the trigger. After 40's death, 45 took 40's dog tags. Within them were audio logs, which 45 listened to. In the logs was 40's confession. She confessed that she had always been lonely. She was weak, and because of that, she was never accepted. 45 showing up in her life made her understand that there had to be more to their lives than just being disposable pawns. She then confessed how she learned of their fates, and then told her that she lied. Thanks to 40's plan, 45 was never in danger of being incinerated, but 40 would have suddenly died in front of her. Understanding how fragile 45 was, she made up that story to push 45 to have the resolve to live, because she believed even dolls have a reason for doing so. Her final wish was to 45 to remember her, as 45 has been her only source of joy in her life. After 45 finished with the logs, she had been filled with that determination to live, and she sought out to escape. But there was one sudden issue. There was one survivor besides herself, M16. M16 looked ragged, but she had apparently killed every T-doll that went berserk, and was looking to escape. However, the exit was sealed, and M16 had no way of opening it. 45's arrival was lucky, as she had the ability to hack into the network. While M16 questioned what happened to her, 45 stated everything went into complete chaos, and she had no idea what happened. While this was a bold lie, 45 delivered it so naturally that M16 was none the wiser. At first, it seemed like both 45 and M16 would be able to leave together. But there was something M16 realized about 45, and it was so uncanny that she could not shake it off. She had realized 40 and 45 were inseparable, yet 40 was killed, and somehow 45 did not have a single source of damage on her. When M16 brought this up, 45 hesitated for an answer, and that was all M16 needed to identify 45 as an enemy. In a split second, both had raised their guns and fired at each other, and a battle ensued. It only took a moment for 45 to realize that M16 was far above her in terms of combat skill. So 45 had to resort to hacking into M16's neural cloud to alter her fire control core and make her fire completely aimlessly to even the odds. Despite this, 45 had no way to kill M16 herself. Her only hope would be for M16 to eventually be crippled by the parafluvivirus that was still in the area. But this only led to M16 closing the gap and engage in close quarters combat, and once again, 45 had no answer for this. Pinned down, M16 used her knife to stab 45 right in the head, but 45 managed to block this with her hand. Still, M16's strength was so above 45's that it even made her arm break when she blocked it. This caused 45 to howl in pain as she frantically clawed at M16's face to desperately escape, causing deep and violent cuts in M16's face, which she fully ignored as she forced the knife down. It barely scraped 45's left eye before M16 suddenly stopped, and her eyes went completely dull. She had succumbed to the virus, literally milliseconds before M16 killed 45. 45 had survived against overwhelming odds. She took a moment to regain herself, but then M16 suddenly woke up as her eyes came back to life. 45 had no idea how that happened or what was even happening in M16's head, but all she could think of at that very point was that it was over. She had no cards left to play, as she slowly began to despair that she would not be able to keep her promise to 40. But M16 did not attack. Instead, she stood up and then walked away in silence. 45, once again, had no idea what just happened, but she realized that wasn't something she could think about right now. She immediately ran away from the battlefield. After taking the time to recover, she decided that she would not rest until she found the bastards that signed off on this operation and killed them personally to avenge 40 and every other doll that was treated as disposable scrap. Within the Yellow Zone, there was a bustling city. Within the city was a criminal organization that managed an underground trafficking site that stole dolls from their owners to do various activities. Within that organization was a doll named Reina. Being an illegal doll, which is just a doll without an owner, this organization was the only life she had known. She had no past, no family, and nothing to herself. Her job was to interact and deceive other dolls, then burn out their neural clouds so their bodies could be rigged to then be added to the ranks of the organization. Despite having autonomy and being able to discern from right and wrong, there was nothing Reina could do about her situation. The gang members had a server that controlled her neural cloud, and if they detected any defiance, they would rig her neural cloud to overclock and then melt down. So even though her heart grew heavy with every doll she had deceived and ruined the life of, she continued to act for her own self-preservation. This was until one fateful day, where she ran into a doll far beyond her capabilities. This doll introduced herself as UMP-45. Even though Reina realized she was a T-doll, she figured a job was a job. She managed to deceive her into going into her facility and then use a disabling taser from behind to knock out 45. At least she thought she did. What happened instead was that she grossly underestimated the specs of a T-doll, even one as low grade as 45. Reina was immediately hacked and lost all bodily function, and 45 began questioning her regarding her masters, while mocking her supposed job. Reina was stuck in an impossible situation. If she let out any information, she would die to self-destruct, but if she didn't answer, this T-doll could easily fry her neural cloud. Reina realized this, and was left with only one option: beg for her life. Of all the ways she could die, she didn't want it to be as a slave to her illegal owners. But she knew this mistake had cost her dearly, and that her life was over. But death never came. 45 suddenly became uninterested in killing her and left. Reina was alone, and intact. But instead of being relieved that her begging worked, she was only deeply confused. Why was she spared? This question would plague her for several days. Despite being free to go back to work, Reina was just plainly distracted. She then realized she hadn't met her quota, and that if she didn't meet it soon, she truly would die to her masters. So she returned to work, only to once again find 45. Realizing her luck, she followed 45 for 3 days, studying her. But 45 eventually grew tired of this and exposed her, stating she could detect her from several blocks away. Reina took the opportunity to ask why a T-doll with no records to any PMC would even be in this city. But this was only met with a very real threat from 45. So Reina quickly changed the subject, asking for her help. She confessed to 45 that she hated who she was and wanted to get out of this life, and told 45 about the server that chained down all of the illegal T-dolls in the city, herself included. After promising every bit of money she had to give to 45, she accepted to help her out of her jam. The next day, Reina led 45 to the server. 45 was surprised how crude it looked, and after jumping to level 2 hacking with Reina, She immediately dissected how it worked and figured out how to disable it. Upon doing so, it triggered an alarm and the network was locked down, causing 45 to be trapped. But Reyna was not, as she dished 45 the instant she triggered the alarm. Her plan worked. Knowing that there was a failsafe in the server, Reyna worked it out so that once the server was disabled, all she would have to do is run as fast as she could to not get captured again. While thankful for 45's help, she knew this would have been her only chance. But then something stopped her from leaving. Despite knowing this was what she wanted to do, she became overwhelmed by guilt. If she left, 45 would be captured and put in the same situation she was in. Even though she knew this was her only chance, her very soul couldn't allow her to leave things as is. So she reconnected to the server to save 45, only to find that the server was completely gone. Before she understood how that was possible, she blacked out. Reyna then woke up dangling from a ceiling. 45 had once again put her in a situation where she could easily kill her. Even though the network did lock down, the fundamental logic behind the server was so easy to decipher that taking it down was simple. But 45 was more interested in why Reyna came back, to which Reyna answered that during that time, she felt guilty, and this was all 45 needed to be convinced to let Reyna go. But to Reyna, this was just perplexing. Why let her go after deceiving her so much? She lied so much to her and put her in danger. So why was she satisfied with just walking off with nothing? But 45 answered that she was going to take down the human enslavers either way, since she hated people like that. The money never mattered. As for Reyna, she reminded 45 of what she used to be, a doll trapped in a fate she could not get out of. If she had someone in her past that could give her that freedom, then things would have ended up very differently for her. The very least she could do was give Reyna the freedom that she never got. Reyna didn't understand where she was coming from, but 45 took that as her actually having a pretty decent life, all things considered. 45 then left Reyna to enjoy her new lease on life. Seeing 45 leave with no strings attached stirred something inside Reyna, something she couldn't let go. A few days later, 45 was caught in a bit of a jam. A practical army of thugs hunted 45 down for stealing all of their money, which 45 clearly did not do. Unfortunately, there were so many thugs that she ran out of ammo. Cornered, she was stuck with little options. But suddenly, Reyna appeared, gunning down a swath of thugs. She had a new appearance, a gun, and a new name, UMP-9. Together, 45 and 9 took down the criminals, but soon after, 45 asked just what the hell was she doing. Reyna explained that taking down the server also took down their firewall, so she easily hacked the organization's bank account and stole all of their money, and used it to modify her appearance, install some illegal mods to her frame, and got herself an outfit and gun of the same series as 45. And since the gun she found was of a UMP-9, that is now her name. 45 immediately realized that she was the reason why the entire organization is hunting her down now, but she brushed that aside to heavily disapprove of Reyna's choices and to drop the act. But Reyna was adamant in giving her life to 45. She was the only one in her life to notice her meaningless existence, let alone taking the time and energy to actually help her. And that was all because 45 saw herself in her. So Reyna would dedicate her life to help her now older sister reach her goals and free her from her pain. 45 still disapproved of this, not wanting new allies, let alone having a sister. Her past was hers alone. Reyna had no idea what she was getting herself into, but she truly did not give a damn about that. To show that they could truly be sisters, Reyna demonstrated her resolve, marking herself with a scar over her eye to be a perfect image of 45. Except that didn't work because she marked the wrong eye. However, this forced 45 to realize just how faithful Reyna was being this time around. For the first time in a long time, she felt something deep inside. So she accepted her new sister. Reyna, now called UMP-9, dedicated herself to achieving 45's life goal, whatever that may be. Sometime later, we catch up with HK416, who is definitely not having a great time. After Operation Butterfly was deemed a failure, StateSec ordered all T-Dolls under that operation to be retired. Although 416 was removed from the operation, she still had the mission parameters, so she was still up for decommission. Realizing that was the case, she escaped from StateSec's grasp as soon as she was able. Unfortunately, her fire control core was removed well before she had that chance, making her combat capabilities significantly less. Still, it's not like she suddenly did not know how to fire her rifle anymore. The true problem she faced is not having any idea what to do next. StateSec had wiped her ownership logs completely. With no owner and no way to prove her allegiance, she was now an illegal doll. But even so, she did not lose hope to prove herself one day. Her sole motivation that kept her going was to find M16 and kill her, for stripping everything she ever wanted away from her. But it would take more than that to survive. Thanks to her rifle, she could easily be identified as a T-Doll. This would cause major problems if she were ever spotted, especially from the police. So she was forced to scavenge for energy, whether it be food or batteries. After days of doing this, she became critically low on energy. She couldn't keep doing this, but she had no idea how to progress. Survive was the only objective she could think of. On one fateful day, she scavenged an alleyway, only to find a small civilian doll. This doll was immediately frightened by 416's weapon and ran off. 416 didn't pay it too much mind, but then she heard that same doll scream from a distance. After investigating, she spotted two smugglers. One of these smugglers had a metal bat, and she was beating the civilian doll to near death. The doll was screaming for help, but after several hits from the bat, her screams fell silent. 416 overheard that they were planning to sell her off, and 416 felt heavily compelled to do something. But despite being a T-Doll and more than capable of beating down the smugglers, she had several factors against her. First is her critically low power. Any sort of combat could make her shut down. Next, the smuggler had a gun, and her gun was empty. Finally, even if she risked combat and got his gun, without a commander, automatic safeguards would lock her from shooting at humans. Still, she couldn't allow herself to let that doll die, so she pointed her empty rifle at the smugglers to scare them off. But this did not work, and only made the smugglers even more interested in selling a T-Doll. As the smuggler pulled out his gun, 416 realized she was out of options. 416 then witnessed two fist-sized rocks slam into the smugglers and instantly knock them out, probably now going to suffer from a pretty bad concussion. 416 then spotted her saviors, UMP-45 and UMP-9. 416 could hardly believe she ran into 45 of all people. 45 was actually quite surprised that 416 wasn't decommissioned, but assured her that this meeting was pure coincidence. 9 and herself were hired to investigate a criminal organization that the smugglers just so happened to be part of, but she nonetheless enjoyed experiencing how the tables have turned between them. 416 noticed that 45 was extremely different. She wasn't just more confident, but a lot colder too. But 45 was gracious enough to catch her up on what happened during Operation Butterfly, and told her everyone except herself had died. 416 immediately asked about M16, but 45 didn't have an answer to that. But at best, if she had survived, she likely had her memories erased. This theory angered 416 greatly. She would not allow M16 to forget about her, which 45 couldn't care less about. Instead, she offered 416 a place on her team. Thanks to 9, they gained a connection to a very talented engineer who could restore 416 back to her fighting state. As payment, 416 would just have to accept her offer, and as a bonus, she would even allow the doll she tried to save to be repaired as well. 416 instantly refused, and 45 decided to leave, which confused 9, but she wasn't about to go against her sister. 416 wouldn't allow herself to be brought low by 45, but the sheer thought of that girl not getting any help compelled her to demonize 45, but this was instantly turned around. 45 had experienced 416 just enough to know that M16 did save her from more than she could possibly imagine. M16 was right. 416 is just a child living a self-obsessed fantasy, fully believing that she'll have her meaningless revenge one day. Yet, she couldn't even do something as simple as protect a doll. She wouldn't last long at all in reality, and she would be better off dead. She thought about putting her out of her misery herself, but decides to leave her to care for that doll in vain. 45 went back to the doll and checked her damage. There was no mistake. She was in really bad shape. She once again felt something stir inside her. Maybe 45 was right. Maybe she was completely out of her depth. Maybe she would die out here. But at least she wasn't running away from her problems. At least she wanted to be something great. She called out to 45, telling her what she was doing was just as childish. But 45 had an answer. She wasn't running away. She has a goal, and she built a system that could help her achieve it. Compared to 416, she was leagues ahead. She hasn't even figured out how to alter her base logic so she could kill humans. The more details 45 laid out, the more 416 began to realize how far behind she was. It was hard to accept. But at that moment, she had to, if only to save that doll. It was a hard-fought battle of words, but 45 finally managed to convince 416 to accept her offer, which only made her smile. She knew 416 would be a powerful asset. This led to 416 getting repaired, having a new fire control core installed, and gaining the ability to freely attack whoever she pleased. Furthermore, her weapon got cleaned up and restocked in ammo. For her end of the deal, 416 had to help 45 and 9 take down a criminal organization that the smugglers were part of. 416 found this to be unnecessary for someone like 45, but a deal was a deal, and she had a score to settle with those criminals anyway. Once they made it to their hideout, 416 used her newfound freedom to single-handedly shoot down every single gang member. Her shots so precise she ensured every single one of them did not die immediately. If the police didn't make it in time, they would die from blood loss. But her goal was to ensure they suffer for a very long time. With the job well done, the team returned to their engineer. His name is Deer, a teenage boy genius that lived a pretty privileged life. Despite this, he was defined by a past experience that made him strongly hate any sort of injustice towards any doll, which led him to get involved in an underground network to aid lost dolls. His sister, Seer, also helps maintain his underground business. 9 had connected 45 to him, and this made him their go-to guy ever since. This also included repairing the civilian doll, which he did splendidly. However, he did make a special note that the overall memories in her neural cloud were not good, to say the least. These memories were so damaging to her that she repressed them deep down. Thanks to that, she can't even remember her own name. This gave everyone the hint that this doll would be better off not going back to her original owners, let alone the streets. Deer could reformat her, but he'd rather not. So he left the decision on what to do with her to 416, who seemed to care the most about her. While 416 initially denied any responsibility to her fate, 45 called out that she took control of her fate the moment she jumped in front of those criminals. She might have been dead, or she might have been sold to some store. But the fact is, she is where she is now because of 416. So the responsibility is hers. This time, 416 took 45's words to heart, and she decided that she will take care of that doll herself. She'll have her travel with her until she can make her way back to Griffin, where they would be able to take care of her. To that, 45 instantly told her that her goals also involved eventually making her way to Griffin. So why not make their agreement a more long-term basis? As a bonus, she'd paid Deer to modify the doll to be a T-doll. So instead of lugging her around on the battlefield, she'd be able to defend herself and the team. Deer actually really liked this idea, and was more than willing to modify her. After some thought, 416 accepted this, on the grounds that she'll kill 45 the moment she stepped out of line. To which 9 instantly replied that she would have to get past her first. Now that they were a full squad, 45 gave their team a name, Squad 404. the squad that does not exist. 416 instantly hated the name. Regardless, with the civilian doll being converted to a T-doll, she was given the name G11. With that, Squad 404 was born. For the rest of the year, they built a reputation for being a Black Ops squad for hire, and took some of the most dangerous missions in the civilian sector. This eventually led to them catching the attention of former Griffin commander Angelia. Through her networking, this led to Squad 404 becoming a primary hire for Griffin to deal with jobs that needed to remain off the books. With this in mind, Squad 404 developed the means to accurately erase recent memories from T-dolls they worked with, so the information of their involvement would never leak out. Within the year 2062, their deeds became strong enough that even Sanguis Ferry deemed them to be a legitimate threat. For quite a while, they would continue to work in the background, but they eventually exposed themselves when Angelia hired them to look into a crucial plan that SF was developing. Squad 404 learned that it involved the parapluie virus. While they were looking into this, they learned that the AR team was in the area, and the AR team also had M16 as a member. 416 broke away from Squad 404 to ambush her, driven by her thirst for revenge. But despite having the element of surprise and higher specs, she was defeated by M16 quite easily. Even though 416 was the better built T-doll, M16 assured her that she lacked the experience, the reaction, and the constant training that she herself had put herself through. But this just angered 416 even more, and began to show the real reason why she couldn't let this go. She wanted to know what she meant to M16 back then, and if she felt sorry for what she did. While M16 admits she was actually quite fond of 416 back then, she meant completely nothing to her now. 416 found this extremely hard to accept. There's no way. She had to have been lying. But M16 didn't fold. She was more concerned with getting back to M4A1. 416 then realized that M4 was the actual person she cared about, and she felt her jealousy rise. But this only made M16 give a very serious threat, telling her to not try anything else, or she would give her a reason to wish she were dead. Afterwards, 45 met with M16. Despite their history, they were eerily cordial with each other compared to 416. Despite not being part of Squad 404, M16 knew of them quite well, and 45 deemed it unnecessary, if not outright dangerous, to try to erase her memories. Instead, she thanked M16 for sparing 416's life, considering she could have easily killed her. They both knew 416 was being childish, and is more emotionally attached to M16 than she cared to admit. As repayment for her mercy, 45 told M16 to deliver a message to Persica, as she would be the only one capable to counter the incoming threat of the virus. Sometime later, Squad 404 was faced with their greatest challenge yet. After AR-15 defected from Griffin, the information she relayed back to them matched with the findings that Squad 404 delivered previously. In retaliation to stopping SF's plan, Griffin hired Squad 404 to participate in Operation Cube, which was a full-scale operation to crack SF's defenses to allow Griffin to go on the offensive. Squad 404 was assigned with destroying a communication jammer that was crucial to SF holding back Griffin. During this operation, they had to deal with ringleader Ouroboros, a T-doll that prided herself on being the perfect strategist, and she was very eager to kill the Black Ops team. Under her command were Hunter and Executioner, both of which were previously defeated by the AR team, and were revived and greatly enhanced. In a head-to-head fight, Squad 404 did not stand a chance. On top of that, Ouroboros had an entire army to work with, and was hell-bent on killing Squad 404 through any means. Squad 404 managed to outwit Hunter, and wear her down long enough that they managed to disable her. But due to Ouroboros using her as a sacrificial pawn, she wiped Hunter's neural cloud remotely and shut her down. Squad 404 got nothing out of this, and only became worn down as a result. They then had to avoid getting slaughtered by Executioner, but with using the knight to their advantage, they managed to disable Executioner's limbs, and were able to get information out of her. But Ouroboros also used Executioner as a sacrificial pawn. While they were fighting, explosives were planted all around the area. which included the jammer. Ouroboros' plan was to intentionally destroy the jammer just to get rid of Squad 404 once and for all. For all intents and purposes, this was the perfect plan. If it were not for one thing. 45 knew Executioner did not want to throw her life away so haphazardly. Sanguis T-Dolls have two priorities that are held above all others: protect themselves and protect each other, and the ringleaders in particular held fast to these ideals. Squad 404 was not strong enough to defeat Hunter, but she had been shut down when she was cornered. 45 used this fact to persuade Executioner to not follow Ouroboros' order, and instead escape with the jammer and recover Hunter. With the ruse in place, the bombs were detonated with no casualties. Ouroboros personally went out to confirm her kill, but realizing no bodies could be found, she became infuriated. Squad 404 remained in hiding and called for Griffin backup. This led to the commander directing an echelon led by Groza, who had a score to settle with Ouroboros. With powerful reinforcements now at their disposal, Squad 404 joined with Groza to take out the ringleader. After getting thoroughly thrashed, Ouroboros managed to escape sheer destruction and return to her command center. She reported to ringleader Agent, who wasn't surprised at all that she had failed. She confessed to Ouroboros that the jammer was not destroyed, and while she had hoped that she could rise above her cowardly ways, she would not give her a second chance. Ouroboros would not be coming back. Agent then left her alone to face her demise. Afterward, 45 approached the heavily damaged Ouroboros and told her what happened with Executioner. While Ouroboros could not believe that Executioner would betray her, 45 gave her a simple rebuttal. Sanguis T-Dolls are not mindless killing machines, and the lack of understanding her own kind was her downfall. 45 then killed Ouroboros, and left her corpse to Griffin as consolation for being unable to destroy the jammer. It would be 6 months before Squad 404's next major operation. The only thing of note between this is the recovery of AR-15. When AR-15 triggered an explosion to rid of herself and the Parapluie virus, Angelia hired Squad 404 to recover her parts. Much later, Deer successfully rebuilt her, and 45 left AR-15 with a message that since she is not presumed dead, she should consider enjoying a taste of freedom with her new employer, Angelia. Their next major operation would be Operation Hypothermia. Their mission this time would be to rescue the AR team. The helicopter was shot down and they were stranded in the middle of SF's testing field for the Jupiter cannons. This made it extremely dangerous for Griffin to mount a rescue, and given their extremely high merits as a Black Ops squad, Squad 404 was deemed their best bet at saving them. While 416 was having a very difficult time imagining herself saving M16, she sucked it up. During their search, 416 noticed 45 was acting noticeably strange. While 45 had always been secretive, it was never at the cost of their objectives. 416 had established communication with ringleader Architect, the one T-Doll who was manning the Jupiter cannons. She seemed willing to indulge 416's questions, but 45 had quickly shut down their comm terminal and told 416 to not fraternize with the enemy. Furthermore, 416 noticed that 45 was secretly communicating with someone on a Sanguis signal. While all of them had the means to masking their signal, they should be the only non-Sanguis dolls that could, which could only mean that 45 had to have been talking to a Sanguis T-Doll. This caused 416 to start questioning 45's integrity. She had remembered that Hellion informed them that any Sanguis technology could have the virus implanted, and as long as the device is active, physical contact is all that is necessary to become infected. Hacking would also be extremely dangerous without vetting the system. 416 had remembered that 45 did touch the active jammer during Operation Cube, but G11 countered that by saying they had been scanned for the virus when they got back to their safe house, and there were no detections. But before they could speculate further, Architect had decided it was time for the new test subjects for the Jupiter cannons, and she has always known where Squad 404 was. 45 immediately ordered the team to get out of the danger zone. With strong maneuvering, they were able to reach the back of Architect's command center and cut the power, and then left during the confusion. One of 416's suspicions were resolved when a Sanguis signal came to life in their comm line. It was a Griffin T-Doll, who was also able to mask their signal into a Sanguis one. 16 Lab, the one that Persico leads, were beginning to develop the means to counter SF's heavy reliance on electronic warfare, and while RO-635 was a leading factor in this, new Griffin T-Dolls were also pushing the boundaries of this tech as well. In other words, Griffin was quickly catching up to SF's technology. Squad 404 was tasked with continuing to distract Architect, while the AR team, as well as their informant, could get away from another ringleader, Gauger, who is Architect's partner. As a stroke of luck, Architect became frustrated enough to leave her command center to personally kill Squad 404, which gave both them and the AR team the opening they needed to get out of the danger zone. While Gauger showed how thoroughly pissed she was at her partner, Squad 404 finally grouped up with the AR team, which only had M16, Softmod, and RO-635 as their leader. Thanks to a past operation gone wrong, M4 was out of action. Despite this, 45 paid the most attention to M16. Knowing 45 would never protect her or her team, M16 claimed some of her ammo and led the way to get everyone to safety. During the moment of reprieve, they caught up each other on their situation. RO asked 45 if she had an escape plan, to which 45 was trying to figure that out. But their first step would be to keep moving. In secret, M16 told RO that if she wanted to ensure everyone makes it out alive, she would not let 45 take command. Seeing how serious she was, RO took this to heart, and like clockwork, 45 approached RO while outside, curious about where she stood as a leader. M16 had already told 45 that RO was Persica's secret experiment, so she was curious how she felt about just being a variant of M4. RO stated she didn't particularly mind it, but 45 pushed this further, telling her that she really did not need to be okay with just being a carbon copy of her older sister. In fact, there is a good chance that M4's leadership would have gotten everyone killed, so why not just carve out her own leadership style? If M16 didn't say anything beforehand, maybe RO would have bought into this logic, but RO shut this down pretty easily, stating she will be maintaining leadership going forward, and for 45 to focus on getting them out. This led to them reaching a communication outpost, where they contacted Hellion. Through her, they managed to set up an evac zone to get to. During this time, there was a heavy tension between M16 and 416, though it was mostly from 416. And while 9 tried to make light conversation, 416 was easily jabbing at M16 on how she lost 2 of her valued sisters. This eventually led to RO asking 45 about their history, but 45 chalked this up to the 2 of them having some beef over a misunderstanding. But even 9 found 416's attitude to be inexcusable, and she ended up apologizing to M16 for her behavior. M16 took it in stride, though she is the type of person to never let anyone know if something got to her. But before they could reconcile any further, they realized Architect and Gauger found them and had already blocked off their means of escape. Turns out they were listening to just about every communication they sent out. Hellion's forces had been delayed by several hours, and it was only a matter of time before SF came crashing down on top of them. Despite the heavy disadvantage they had, 45 came up with a plan. They had 3 echelons: the AR team, Squad 404, and the Advanced Griffin Squad. Squad 404 would infiltrate Architect's base once again and cut off the power to the cannons, as well as breaking their comms channel. The Griffin T-Dolls will engage Gauger, and the AR team will raid another section of Architect's base to take control of the system for the gates and open it. After that, everyone will make a break for it. Before the mission was accepted, M16 pulled RO aside and warned her about accepting this plan. RO at first did not understand why M16 was so paranoid about 45, considering her job is to get them out. But M16 assured her that her only measure is to get her squad and the AR team out. The Griffin T-Dolls, to her, are completely expendable. This caught RO off guard, since she never thought that 45 would be that ruthless, but M16 promises her that she is. The problem with this revelation is RO couldn't think of a better plan. She asked what M4 would do in a situation. but M16 just answered that M4 would make a choice. But RO isn't M4. She has to make her own choice. Regardless, the plan went underway. Squad 404 managed to cut the power once again and sabotage the communications. The chaos that the Griffin squad was making slowed Gager down, and Architect was too busy trying to support Gager to handle Squad 404 personally. This gave the AR team ample time to open the gates, but something did not go to plan. The AR team was taking way longer than expected to open the gate. With only a moment remaining before Architect would manage to turn the power back on, 45 decided it was best to abandon their position and get out while they could. If the AR team was having trouble somehow, they would support them. But 416 brought up the Griffin squad was barely managing to survive against Gager, but 45 deemed them completely unnecessary. 416 was actually caught off guard by this and stated the AR team would never accept that. But 45 knew this. That's why she set up the plan that way. Either they run away and survive, or they fight two ringleaders and die. The choice seemed easy enough. 416 was disgusted by this, but 45 found it so interesting that after all the shit talk she gave to M16, that she actually cared about how she felt. She then called out 416 for having only one foot out the door. Did she want to go back to M16 or not? She then told her, "Let go of your pathetic pride and join us for real. Only if we be their stain will they truly value us." 9 and G11 felt the tension was rising during this critical moment, but they openly stated their allegiance to Squad 404 and not Griffin. This only left 416 as the person who was truly conflicted. But before this escalated any further, RO contacted Squad 404 and stated there had been a change of plan. The AR team did not raid Architect's base and went to a communications outpost instead. 45 actually found this insane, since they are still inside the base. Once the power came back on, Architect's forces would immediately collapse on top of them. But immediately after saying that, a large Griffin force stormed Architect's base, directed by the commander. Through Commander's direction, they managed to capture Architect and save the Griffin squad that was holding off Gager, forcing that ringleader to flee. When RO and 45 met up again, 45 was very curious, if not slightly appalled, by her choice to put all her hopes on the commander. It was a very M4-like thing to do. Was she so willing to just be a carbon copy of her? RO finally answered this by asking, was that such a bad thing? She loves M4, and she will wholeheartedly believe in the person that M4 believes in. To that, 45 can only feel a sense of strong envy, to have a role model that she could base her decisions off of. Despite that, it was time for Squad 404 to leave. With some simple trickery, she managed to erase RO's memories before she departed. Months later, Squad 404 was given upgrades to their electronic warfare capabilities. This would be the first time 416 and G11 would have access to level 2 hacking. This is because Persica desperately needed a highly efficient team to recover a lost drone that was shot down. While Squad 404 was never given the details on what this was for, this drone actually contained a pulse particle cannon that M16 had before she defected to SF. M4 would later be given this cannon to great effect. Now, this is also an event where we learn about 45's past, but since I've already gone over this, and that was about 80% of the content for this event, I'll just be rapid firing what happens here. Squad 404 is assigned to infiltrating deep into SF territory for that drone. Considering the danger, the commander had agreed to lend Squad 404 his aid through allowing command authorization of some of his T-Dolls to 45. Once at the heart of SF, they had to deal with ringleaders Dreamer and Destroyer. While Dreamer acted very much like a strategist, Destroyer was sent out multiple times through various advanced bodies. One was a great upgrade, another not so much. Regardless, it was a close shave for Squad 404. We learned that 45 had indeed been infected with a refined version of the Parapluie virus. This virus works different from the virus that was in Operation Butterfly. The refined Parapluie virus puts any infected T-Doll under direct control of Elisa. However, this did not work on 45 because she was already an original carrier. We'll get into the specifics of that another time. That said, the refined parapluid virus was still effective in overwhelming 45 systems. This made Dreamer abandon the mission for the drone and instead attempt to capture 45 by overloading her neural cloud. But with the efforts of Squad 404, the Griffin T-Dolls under their command, and Deer's remote troubleshooting, they managed to save 45 before she died. With her back online, she commanded everyone to take out the destroyer and retrieve the drone. Now, the spectacular part is this operation put Squad 404 right in the middle of the Singularity event. Sierra overheard the distress call from Hellion, ordering all commanders to retreat from the area as their T-Dolls were infected by the refined parapluid virus, and all hell broke loose. 45 looked at this as a great opportunity to get some extra rewards from Griffin, so she aided them by saving the Griffin T-Dolls and helping them retreat. This led to them meeting with Angelia, who was also in the area. She provided Squad 404 her next job immediately. Find the central database, dig up as much information about Operation Butterfly and Ogus, and find Elisa's location. And all of this had to be done before the military rolled over SF. With the information on Operation Butterfly close to her grasp, 45 wasn't about to lose this opportunity. Squad 404 traversed through the no man's land, eventually running into infected T-Dolls, which 45 had no qualms with putting out of their misery. But they quickly ran into a problem. The virus had also spread in the military dolls, which were several leagues stronger than Squad 404 could handle. Not even able to put a dent into them, they were quickly surrounded and were seconds away from being obliterated before the military dolls stopped. For context, this was when the military turned on their defense programs, which overloaded their networks. This was to stop Elisa from taking over their entire system and single-handedly destroying the military from the inside. While Squad 404 had no idea about this, 45 counted their blessings and quickly ordered Squad 404 to proceed forward. They eventually got to the information they needed, but like clockwork, they were once again trapped, this time by Gager and a horde of SFT dolls. Gager herself was beyond their capabilities, but her entire army made their chances of survival completely zero. 45 contacted Angelia for backup, and in response, she called Team Defy, led by M4A1, to come to their aid. While 45 did not see this plot twist coming, this was perfectly fine for her plans. Now, when M4 and 45 meets for the first time, this goes a lot into what I talked about in episode 1. So I will be glossing over portions of this primarily to maintain focus on Squad 404. If you want more context on M4's story, be sure to watch the latter half of episode 1. Together, Team Defy and Squad 404 defeated Gager, and M4 executed her. 45 was somewhat surprised that she wasn't kept alive, but Angelia didn't pay it much mind. 416 asked if M4 and AR-15 were the only ones here. Where was M16? M4 promptly answered that she was MIA, and to you non-military folks out there, if an important figure is MIA, that usually means they are dead, just they don't have the means to confirm it. With that in mind, it's understandable that 416's reaction was the sheer lack of one, completely stunned in disbelief, and even 45 turned sour at that news. But she had to bounce back because Angelia would remind her this is the most critical assignment to date, and at the end of this, she'll be getting what she's been looking for. A few hours later, Angelia gives 45 her next assignment, which is to monitor M4. Sometime after that, 45 detected that M4 was, somehow, talking to another being within herself, and was convinced to meet with Elisa. Since Angelia had already planned to use M4 as bait, she took advantage of this to rope M4 fully into her plan. Squad 404 and Team Defy were then directed to pick up a last resort, which is a dirty bomb made of colas fluid. Should things go completely wrong, they'll use the bomb to take the military out all in one go. The plan with Elisa did not go very well, as M4 and Elisa did not see eye to eye during their conversation. This caused a major battle with the remaining forces of SF, but their battle was interrupted by the military rolling in to capture Elisa. All hands were on deck to stop the military from capturing Elisa, but their firepower was too great. Angelia told everyone that it'll be over if the military got their hands on Elisa, so they needed to do everything in their power to get Elisa first. This caused Squad 404 and Team Defy to try to break through a line of tanks by rushing past them as they were reloading their shells. However, one of them was late at firing a volley, and it turned its cannon to 416. 416 moved as fast as she could, but the tank's tracking was too accurate. At the very last second, 45 shoved 416 out of the way and ate the tank shell directly. As she was shot, she felt her neural cloud surge, and her thoughts were filled with the promise she made to UMP-40. But when she came to, she realized she was only a step away from being no better than scrap. Nearly all of her functions died, motor skills included. Her right arm was completely torn off, her limbs were shredded by shrapnel, and she had even lost an eye. 416 demanded to know why the hell she did that, but 45 didn't really have an answer for her. The only thing she managed to keep safe was the detonator for the dirty bomb, which she provided to M4, leaving the responsibility to her before she shut down. After the bomb was detonated, UMP-9 made the executive decision to abandon the mission and retreat, while Team Defy carried on despite everything against them. For now, Squad 404's #1 priority was to save 45. Since they didn't have a neural server to act as backup, anyone dying on the field would be a real death. They resorted to revealing themselves to Griffin, with 416 begging for Kalina's help. The commander had already given Kalina the go-ahead to give whatever Squad 404 needed to save 45, and fortunately for them, Kalina is an expert at repairing T-dolls. After inspecting 45, she could see that her body was basically unsalvageable. Along with the damage already mentioned, her main battery was also totaled. In her expert opinion, Kalina could not recommend taking the time to repair her body, and on that note, 416 suggested ejecting 45's neural cloud and putting her in a new body. But 45 woke up just in time to tell everyone to not do this. The thing is, her neural cloud isn't particularly spacious, and overloading it with data would cause her neural cloud to crash. So she keeps very important and confidential data stored in the body itself. This made replacing 45's body non-negotiable. 416 did try to sidestep this by asking 9 if they could just transfer the data to her, but this made 9 confess that they weren't the same model. Thanks to this, their level 3 systems were completely different. Now completely out of options, 416 resigned to the idea that 45 would actually die to her own stubbornness. But Kalina assured them that on the commander's honor, she wouldn't let 45 die. Quickly after this, a Griffin T-Doll alerted Kalina that a new army had entered onto the battlefield and were obliterating their remaining forces. They were neither SF nor the military, yet they were more fierce than either of them. With the chaos they were ensuing, many of the Griffin remnants were scattered and now lost on the battlefield. The commander let Kalina know that reinforcements were on the way, but for now they would have to hold it together until they arrived. This caused any T-Doll who were combat capable to step forward and get ready to fight for their lives. At this moment, HK-416 felt compelled to step forward as well. When questioned by Kalina, 416 stated that if this outpost fell, Squad 404 dies as well. When the Griffin T-Doll asked who she was, she just said she was also a Griffin T-Doll who was back on duty temporarily. But this deeply worried 9. She had said from the very beginning that her goal was to return to Griffin. While 9 had always seen them as one big happy family, she knew 416 didn't feel the same. She had stayed with them for well over a year, but G11 was now a competent fighter, and she had paid off any debt she owed to 45. So would it be time for 416 to cash out on their agreement? When 9 brought this up to 416, she evaded the question, but also stated that regardless, she had to make sure they all got out of this alive. 416 got a direct line to the commander and acted as his adjutant, or field leader, for battle. For 416, this was a personal achievement in the making. She was always meant to be an elite Griffin T-Doll, and now she can lead these dolls to victory. But what she saw in reality was far different than she expected. Dolls openly argued with her, and their personalities were not professional at all. They could even be disrespectful to the commander. They also didn't follow orders to the very letter. To 416, this was all wrong. This wasn't the Griffin that she knew. Griffin T-Dolls were supposed to understand that they were killing machines, expendable on the battlefield. That should have been the bare minimum, but that just wasn't the case. Most of these T-Dolls have never even been on the front lines, only playing a part in logistics, yet they volunteered to go onto the battlefield anyway? It was then explained to her that T-Dolls have quirks built into them from the very start, and these quirks are not something that can be erased. No matter how much you try to beat it out of someone, it'll always remain. But there was one thing that T-Dolls had grown to value out of everything else: trust. And there was no person that they trusted more than their commander, who cherished their lives and the friendships they made. That's why, even though everyone knew it'd be costly to save all of the stranded T-Dolls, they'd do it anyway, because the commander knew that even though their neural data could be backed up and they would be restored in another body, they won't remember the pain that they'd gone through with others. Their friendships matter far more than their own lives. So even if 416 and other commanders of the past saw them as expendable, this commander would never leave any doll behind. And in return, the Griffin T-Dolls would run through fire and brimstone to save each other. And this was only proven as when more Griffin T-Dolls were saved, they became much stronger with their comrades by their side. But what got to 416 the most was that commander constantly going against their advice to call anyone a lost cause. After hearing the Griffin T-Dolls celebrate their reunion and praise 416 for leading such a ragtag group to victory, she had understood how woefully naive she had been. She had always been chasing to be the perfect elite T-Doll, but she never stopped to understand what that actually was. She had always hated how cold-hearted 45 was, but she was nowhere near as brave and loyal as any of the commander's dolls. She was just stuck in the middle, unable to choose what she actually wanted to be, and this finally got her to admit that her methods were completely wrong from the very beginning. She had admitted this to the Griffin Army. "We made it, but it wasn't thanks to me. I didn't think I could save you all. It was the commander who believed in you. The commander said we must save all our T-Dolls, and so I did. I don't even have the right to stand amongst you, but if it's an order, I'll carry it out, because only the commander can lead us to victory, and only in victory do I see the future." And this called for all the T-Dolls to agree and cheer for the commander to lead them to victory. This let the 416 stand behind. When it was time for Squad 404 to be evacuated, she told 9 that she volunteered to continue fighting for the commander on his mission to save Angelia. 9 had realized she had gone through a major change, and 416 clarified that by saying there are some things she would never have learned if she stuck with Squad 404. Despite that, she had no plans on returning to Griffin. She won't abandon Squad 404, but she has to take the chance to grow as a person, and sticking with the commander would be the best way to learn what she truly wants to be. This gave 9 a lot of relief, and she told 416 that Squad 404 will wait for her for as long as it takes. Now, just like with M4, I go into a good deal of detail about Angelia's rescue in episode 1, so if you want to learn more about that, be sure to check that out. While 416 was working on that operation, Deer and Seer had managed to run a full diagnosis on 45. While Kalina managed to restore 45's main battery, her body was still completely totaled, and Deer recommended changing bodies. Furthermore, 45's body was so out of date that finding suitable parts would take more effort than it was worth. Seer agreed with this, emphasizing that Deer could easily give her a body several times stronger than what she had now. But 45 still refused, and would rather that Deer replaced every damaged part of her body, even if he had to replace every limb. As long as she could keep the body, she'd pay whatever the price would be. Deer wondered if taking a tank shot to the chest also damaged her mind, but he nonetheless shut her down and got to work. This led to 45 resting in her level 3 consciousness, which at first was just a black void. But then she felt a presence, which shouldn't be possible. But what she found was the last person she expected, UMP-40. 45 couldn't believe it, but 40 immediately told her to remember the promise they made, that one day they would get a body that is worthy of their strength and to see the world. Was she so willing to let that go just to keep the body as a memento? 45 digitally forged her gun and told her that she isn't 40. But 40 simply asked was she seriously going to shoot her again? And this broke 45. She didn't know what this ghost was, but she was so convincing that she didn't dare shoot her. All she could do is scream that she wasn't going to give up this body. 40 responded to this by hugging her, telling her that it was just the two of them. There was no mission and no Squad 404. She didn't need to ignore her heart right now. So 40 told her to just take a moment to finally let all of that pain out. And just like a dam breaking, she did. She cried for a very, very long time in 40's arms. Once 45 was able to compose herself, 40 once again told her to remember their promise, going as far as to help her remember by showing the same images she showed in the past. This caused 45 to begin to understand what was actually going on. These are all of her own memories of 40. Within her heart, she created a persona of 40 so she could never forget her. 40 hesitantly confirmed this, stating that she had been locked under the sealing mechanism that was put in place. So as long as that remained, she couldn't reach 45's neural cloud to make herself known. This also means even though she had fully witnessed Operation Butterfly firsthand, the security program forced all memories and logs about it to be locked away in level 3 and couldn't be freely accessed. This scenario right now was likely a special case thanks to 45's current state. That said, 40 stressed that she is only the 40 that 45 perceived her to be, and nothing more. Still, that was enough to showcase that she was truly the reason why 45 couldn't change bodies like she promised. And if the real 40 were here, she'd call her a dumbass, since that was her dying wish. But that was the problem. 40 isn't here, and 45 refuses to let that go. She had chosen to keep living to get revenge for 40, and if she was forced to forget that, she might as well just not be 45 at all. 40 understood this, and though she tried her best, she knew this gambit probably wouldn't have worked. So she took this to a different angle. 40 asked 45 to promise that when she gets revenge for both of them, that she'll get a new body and leave all this behind. While 40 is locked to this body, both she and the real 40 would want her to take a chance to enjoy life. 45 found this new promise to be more agreeable. She promises she will kill the people behind Operation Butterfly, and afterwards, she will bury this body and let 40 rest in peace. After making this promise, 45 could feel herself reactivating. As parting words, 40 told her to take care of her new friends. When 45 was reactivated, she noticed her new look was different. Deer stated he went to hell and back to make this work, since 45's body was incompatible with a lot of conventional parts, thanks to her status as a Sanguis T-doll. Regardless, what he gave her was a substantial upgrade. Even the metal arm would give her strength she never had before. 45 then asked about the lack of an eye replacement. NDR stated that there just wasn't a compatible eye for her. As compensation, he enhanced her other senses and electronic warfare capabilities. 45 found this overall satisfactory, and after that, the rest of Squad 404 came rolling in to check in on her. After a heartfelt reunion, or rather as heartfelt as it was going to get with Squad 404, 416 told her that the commander was captured, and she needed her help. 45 was surprised that she was actually being humble for once, but soon learned that it was more than that. 416 changed, and she seemed to have truly joined the squad. It was this moment that 45 realized that this world wasn't so bad to live in, and just maybe she actually does have a place in it. She then moved out, with her squad and 40 at her side. So this goes into continuum turbulence. which again is in episode 1. If you want to learn more about that, please go watch it. Squad 404 was not involved in the Isomer event at all, so nothing to talk about there. I could talk about how 416 and 9 would upgrade it, but literally 99% of their story was going over their origins. And G11's upgrade is going to be well after the next major events. So, yeah, this is the ending. Huh, I like how that worked out.